Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over a brand new mono-white Planeswalker that was introduced to the game in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty called the Wandering Emperor. So, let's get into it. The Wandering Emperor is the second Planeswalker released in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and she is the first of the monocolor Planeswalkers being released. She has one of the new passive abilities, along with the typical spread of 3 Planeswalker abilities. Her passive ability, Wanderer's Speed, makes it so that when you cast your second card each turn, you're going to create a Renewed Surroundings token. That Renewed Surroundings token is a support with 2 shields that is effectively going to buff each of the Wandering Emperor's abilities. So when you're building around this Planeswalker, the idea is that you want to try to be able to play 2 spells in a turn every so often so that when you use your loyalty abilities, you get more out of them, as each of them will do additional stuff if you have a Renewed Surroundings token. The passive ability here is the only way to be getting these Renewed Surroundings tokens, so you have to play off of the Wandering Emperor's passive if you want to get the most out of her kit. Her first ability, Emperor's Guard, is going to create 2 Samurai tokens. Those tokens are vanilla 2/2 tokens. Then, if you control the Renewed Surroundings token from the Wandering Emperor's passive, you're going to create an additional, a 3rd Samurai token, and Samurai tokens you control will gain Defender and First Strike until the beginning of your next turn. This makes it so that if you have the Renewed Surroundings token out and your opponent's creatures are going to have 6 power or less that on the battlefield, then if you use this first ability because of the Defender and First Strike, it will wipe out your opponent's side of the board. Unless, you know, the creatures also have flying or something like that. There are exceptions, but nonetheless, there are actually times where you would actually want to use this first ability. 7 loyalty is a pretty reasonable amount of loyalty to spend on a first ability as well, so she doesn't feel like her abilities, actually any of the 3 of them for that matter, are too expensive. The second ability, Displacer Style Vanishing Cut, is going to add removal to her kit, which is always a welcome bonus. It's going to make it so that you exile the first opposing creature without Vigilance, and you gain 10 life, and your creatures get a permanent +2/+2 buff. Then, if you control the Renewed Surroundings token from the Wandering Emperor's passive, you're going to repeat this effect. So you're going to exile the next creature, gain another 10 life, and give your creatures another permanent +2/+2 buff. This second ability, Displacer Style Vanishing Cut, is I think one of the best removal abilities on a Planeswalker right now in the game. I don't think it's the best. I think Garruk Cursed Huntsman's second ability is the best in destroying a creature, drawing 2 cards, and gaining life equal to that creature's toughness. But nonetheless, this one here, being able to exile 2 creatures and to be able to exile them regardless of hexproof, because it's just the first opposing creature without Vigilance, is definitely going to come in handy. The only times that you're really going to feel like this ability isn't doing too much for you is if your opponent's creatures all have Vigilance. So I did find that in my playtesting with the Wandering Emperor, I was very often able to use this second ability when I had a Renewed Surroundings token out, and so I was able to get the most out of this ability by spending the 13 loyalty to exile 2 of my opponent's creatures. I did very much like this ability. The third ability, Way of the Blade, is a creature buff in her kit. So this one's going to make it so that target creature you control gets a permanent +2/+2 buff, and then permanently gains both Double Strike and Vigilance. Then, if you have the token from the passive, the Renewed Surroundings, then that creature that you buffed and gave Double Strike and Vigilance to is going to get another 2/2 buff, and it's going to gain Berserker and Defender. So it'll have Double Strike, Vigilance, Berserker, and Defender. Now, one thing that's interesting to note about a creature with both Defender and Vigilance is that a creature with Vigilance will not block an opposing creature if that block would kill it, unless there is Double Strike involved that can actually mess with it. But typically, a creature with Vigilance won't block if it will die for blocking. And a creature with Defender is going to block no matter what. Now, Vigilance does actually override Defender. So if a creature has both Vigilance and Defender, it will not block if the block would kill it. However, giving the creature a +4/+4 buff and double strike is going to make it so that it'll probably be able to survive the strike and kill your opponent's stuff. And by giving it Berserker, it's kind of just going to be throwing itself at your opponent's creatures anyways. So between the first, second, and third ability, you have a way of making creatures, of making them more powerful, and of getting rid of your opponent's creatures. So she's got 3 things going for her that are really cool. She has a win condition and removal built into her kit. Her mana bonuses are the best in the game for a monocolored walker. Hers are centered around the Bant colors, so she's got +7 to white, which is phenomenal, and then +3 to white's allied colors in blue and green. And then she's got -2 to both black and red. So it's going to be really easy to play a bunch of cards using the Wandering Emperor, and having the +7, +3, +3 spread for the mana bonuses definitely makes it so that getting those renewed surroundings by activating the passive by casting a second card each turn definitely feels very doable. The one real thing that the Wandering Emperor has going against her is that the Puzzle Master's Ajani exists in the game. Had the Wandering Emperor come out like a few months ago, or like even a year ago, then she would be a must-add Planeswalker to every collection, because she would be the best white Planeswalker in the game. However, now that we have Puzzle Master's Ajani, it makes it a little bit more tricky to justify picking up any mono-white walker, because that one is just so good. We also happen to have Grandmaster of Flowers, which is very strong as well. And I think you could make a pretty reasonable comparison for the Wandering Emperor and the Grandmaster of Flowers in terms of how they are going to play, and then also just in terms of their power levels. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking of picking up the Wandering Emperor. So now I want to talk a little bit about how you can build around the Wandering Emperor's kit, and I want to show you guys some gameplay, of course, of this Planeswalker in action. When you're looking to build a deck around the Wandering Emperor with your collection, you're going to want to look for a few different things. The things that I found were the most effective for building with the Wandering Emperor were having abilities that were going to draw cards and give mana. So if you just type mana into the search bar, you're able to see the cards in your collection that are going to give you stuff with mana. The reason why being able to draw cards with mana is so important with this Planeswalker is that if you're able to draw an extra card on any given turn, and you're able to give it mana, then you're going to likely be able to play 2 cards in a turn, which means that you're going to be able to activate the passive. And the more often that you're activating the passive, the more that you're going to get out of the Planeswalker's abilities. So cards like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, which should be a major chase card for you if you don't already have it, is going to be an amazing card to play with this Planeswalker because it's going to draw you cards and it's going to give you mana. If you wind up picking up Velomachus, or you've been lucky enough to pull it, this is another phenomenal card to run with this Planeswalker because it's going to be fetching spells and giving them mana. Furthermore, the abilities from the Planeswalker are going to be buffing Velomachus up, which means that the spells that you're going to fetch are going to get more mana, and if you're able to use your third on Velomachus and you give it double strike, between having flying, vigilance, and double strike, it's going to be blocking and killing probably everything that your opponent is going to play. There are some newer cards that have come out that are going to pair really well with this Planeswalker. From the new set, if you picked up Light Paws, I wrote Law because Light and Paws, but Light Paws, Emperor's Voice, is one of the best cards you can put in a deck with this Planeswalker, because this card is going to make it so that you can just cast a ton of auras every single turn. And if you just keep the last one in your hand from casting, then on your next turn, you can just start it again. And so every single turn, you can just play a chain of auras that is going to give you your passive token, because this thing is going to trigger up to 3 times per turn, meaning that you're going to be able to play up to 4 cards per turn. So if you just play the 3, you're going to get the passive, and then you're also going to have one in reserve that you're going to be able to cast on the next turn to just get the chain going again and always have the passive down. If you don't have the new cards, you can stick with things that are going to convert gems. That is also going to work out very strongly with this Planeswalker, especially because it has such incredibly high mana gains. So if you were to use, like from Origins, Knight of the White Orchid, this creature is going to come in and it's going to convert gems to white, which means that it's very well possibly going to make it so that you'll be able to play multiple other cards. And so this is a card that already has First Strike and Defender. And so if you're able to use the Emperor's abilities to get rid of your opponent's cards in the event that they have something with a greater power than this thing's toughness, then the passive ability, not the passive, the activated abilities from the Planeswalker that are going to buff the Knight would make it so that this becomes a little bit more of an insurmountable problem for your opponent to deal with. One other avenue that you can take with this Planeswalker that I really liked was actually running Isshin Two Heavens as one, because this one is going to make it so that when you match only 3 gems, you gain an extra swap. So with this Planeswalker, what you can do is you can have your gem swap, right? You make your swap, you get your match, and then you play cards from your hand, and then that enables you to actually play cards, potentially get the passive down, and then use a Planeswalker ability, as opposed to needing to play cards on your turn, and then have your opponent's turn come up, where they might potentially destroy the token, the passive token, and then on your next turn, be able to activate a Planeswalker ability. Since you activate Planeswalker abilities before your combat phase, right, or before you make your swap, getting an extra swap is definitely going to come in really handy with this Planeswalker. The one downside to Isshin and all of the Samurai with this when you match only 3 gems is that, at least for me on iOS, this is how I think it is supposed to work. It makes it so that when you make your first match on your turn, if only 3 gems are matched, then you gain an extra swap. Meaning that if you have a bunch of gem conversion in your deck, and you wind up matching more than 3 gems from an incidental match because of your conversion, then you actually will not be able to get an extra swap, because it's not any time you match them, it seems to only be for your first match. So I really hope that this card gets changed to make it so that on your first swap, if you match only 3 gems, gain an extra swap. I think that would definitely make this card more consistent and more viable. But I mean, it's a small tweak, so. Beyond that, you're just going to want to try and put in some removal and some big baddies into your deck. You'll see that in this particular deck that I made, I just threw in some of the bigger baddies that exist in Standard between Faithbond Judge, Savior of Olenbach, and Angel of Destiny, and then I filled it with a bunch of gem conversion and removal. I found that pretty much every deck, and when I say pretty much, I mean actually every deck that I tested using this Planeswalker was actually quite effective, and I did really enjoy my time playing with this walker. So let's go ahead and get into my gameplay using this Planeswalker. For this first match, I decided that, as opposed to my usual take where I make a Pauper or a Pauper Plus build with my entire collection, I would do it with just cards from the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set. I thought it would be kind of fun to try something out where I only used commons, uncommons, and rares from the current set, as this Planeswalker really seems thematic to the set, with the whole samurai theme going with it as well. So you'll see that I'm running both Isshin, which is the extra swap samurai, along with the double strike samurai. And there, with that turn, as I played multiple cards, I was able to get my passive ability down, and just with all that loyalty, I figured I would also try and get the samurai tokens down from the first ability, and then hopefully be able to make a 3-match and then give them the double strike. But as you can see, the game is not giving me the double strike here for the 3-match, and so here I'm going to be trying to navigate around to get that. So I don't actually have the passive token down on the battlefield here, and so given that I have a card that is going to give my creatures double strike, I decided to use my second ability as opposed to my third. And so there you'll see that even though I matched 3 gems, it also wound up making a subsequent match. And so I did not get the extra swap. So That was my mistake. Now here, I make a 5 match thinking, okay, if I make the 5 match, then after I make the 5 match, I can go ahead and make a 3 match, and I'll still be able to get the double strike and the extra swap. So I'm going to disable Banishing Slash. That's going to serve as removal for the deck. And you'll see that once again, I do not get double strike and I do not get the extra swap. So it really does need to be your first swap for Ishin. Now, I know that this isn't a video on Ishin. It's a video on the Wandering Emperor. But just if you're wondering what's going on, so for example there, my conversion made a 3 match into a 3 match. So even if I make a 3 match here, I should not get an extra swap. So because I got the double swap. So here you'll see that I make a 3 match, and once again, I don't get the extra swap. So I'm just highlighting this here just to show you that if you decide to make your own samurai deck using the Wandering Emperor, that you really have to be careful with the abilities that are going to say when you match 3 gems, just because it's really nitpicky on how it's going to work out. So here I have a 5 match waiting for me, but my conversion winds up making the match for me, which means that I know for sure that I will not be able to get my Samurai's ability for an extra swap. But if I take the white swap into the blue 5, I'll get an extra swap anyways, and I would like to get the passive token down. So here I've got the opportunity to use Displacer Sile, the second ability, right? Wave cutting or whatever it is. Sorry, I have COVID brain still from COVID, and it makes my head super foggy. So if I sound just a little bit less coherent, it's just because it's a lot harder for me to hold information in my head right now. But I'm going to play my samurai. I know that I've got a bonus swap. I know I'm going to be giving my opponent samurai, but I also know that I'm going to be playing 2 cards, which means that I'm going to be getting the Wandering Emperor's passive token, which means that I will be able to use my second ability and kill both of my opponent's creatures. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to get rid of my opponent's little kicker lifelink critter, and then I'm going to get rid of the samurai that I just gave them. And now I've got a really strong board position. I have more removal in my hand, so I'm just going to lock that down. I've already used the draw ability with Tamiyo, so I'm not going to be able to get anything out of that. And so I'm going to go ahead and swing into my opponent. My opponent has 1 health left, and I have my first ability waiting. So even if Ashiok wipes the board, I'm going to be able to use my first ability to make samurai and kill Ashiok. There, you'll see that I finally, for the first time in the match, get a 3 match. That's only a 3 match. So I'm finally able to use Ryu to give double strike to one of my creatures. So I just thought that this video is a really good showcase of the Wandering Emperor's abilities, as I was able to use that first and second very effectively to maintain control of the battlefield. And then also to showcase that if you wanted to build a deck around the samurai theme, that you just need to be a little bit more careful than you might otherwise be if you have a collection of heavy converters, because they can mess with it. Now I've got a 55-55 double strike on the board with Menace, and so this is very much game over. I'm going to be hitting for 110 with that token, and that's the end of Ashiok. In this second match, you'll see that I'm going up against what I said earlier in the video is the strongest mono White Walker in the game. And so here you'll get to see that the Wandering Emperor definitely can keep up with Ajani. However, you'll also see that this deck here is very heavily stacked with cards, and so that's definitely going to help it out. So Ajani's passive is going to be making those little cat tokens every turn, which is definitely something that is kind of difficult to deal with, especially in conjunction with Ajani's activate abilities. But I'm hoping that the removal and then the third ability here for the Wandering Emperor will give me enough leeway to be able to counter Ajani's passive and abilities. Now, you'll also see that the gems on the board really aren't being kind to me here, and that can definitely happen. It can always happen when you're running a Planeswalker that is very heavy in mana bonuses to one set of colors and not so favorable to others. And so here you'll notice that the way that I'm matching gems is really to maximize both mana and loyalty, because unlike Ajani here, whose loyalty abilities cost effectively nothing. The Wandering Emperor's abilities are a little bit more expensive. Now, they are cheap by loyalty standards, so there's definitely a lot of play with the Wandering Emperor's abilities, but you do have to make matches more for loyalty than you would have to for a Ajani. Just a difference in how you might play these two Planeswalkers. So there is a very favorable looking match with the green gems. However, I very much don't want it because I don't want to give my opponent anything good. So I've got a white into loyalty, which is fantastic because now I'm going to get a judge down. And that judge is going to lock down Ajani's side of the board unless Ajani finds some way of killing my judge here. So my opponent swings through. You'll see that my opponent has Ajani's enlist ability on both of the kitties that enable him to choose who he attacks. And so Ajani is actually choosing to ignore my defender here and just attack my Planeswalker. So here's where I could use my second ability. And I could try and exile my opponent's stuff, but I don't have my passive ability on the battlefield right now. And since I don't have my passive ability on the battlefield, I wouldn't be able to exile both of them. I'd only be able to exile one of them. So any of my abilities here that I activate will actually only give me 1/2 of the ability, be it Way of the Blade, the Displacer style Vanishing Cut, or Emperor's Guard to make the Samurai tokens. But that's just, once again, because I do not have the passive. So this is actually one of the areas that I feel like is like a pseudo shortcoming of the Wandering Emperor, which is simply that if you don't have the passive token down, it can sometimes feel like a waste to use your abilities just because you want to be able to get more out of them. So you really definitely want to make sure that you're prioritizing a way to be able to play more cards from your hand. So here you'll notice that I'm actually going to attempt to play the Fateful Absence so that I can potentially get 2 cards off this turn. However, once again, the battlefield is not kind to me. I don't really have anything on the battlefield that is going to give me extra mana. So if I take the red match into just in the middle, I can maybe get red into black, but you'll see that I'm just going to go ahead and activate my ability because I don't expect to be able to get the double portion of that ability. And that's just fine because I'm going to be at full health. I've got an Angel of Destiny down. I've got my Faithbound Judge, which has completely neutered Ajani's side of the battlefield. And now I've taken off enough of Ajani's health that Ajani is not going to be getting more of his tiny kitties on the battlefield. So I'm going to play a Ganjo, and I'm going to actually let the Fateful Absence cast right there just because it's going to give me my passive. That was just in case I was able to use my second ability or something this coming turn to buff my creatures a little bit more. But it didn't let me. It's fine. This is definitely game over. Ajani has lost. I have won. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and activate my first ability just for giggles here to play the tokens because I have the passive on the battlefield. And then I'm going to make my swap, and my judge is going to kill Ajani with 20 to the face, and that will be a good game. In conclusion, I have the Wandering Emperor somewhere between the A tier and the S tier. She is an absolutely fantastic Planeswalker. She has a lot going in her kit. She has everything that you would want in a Planeswalker. She has a solid health total, she has good abilities all around that provide you a win condition, and that will also increase your board position, and then she also has some of the best mana bonuses in the game. However, with that said, she still isn't as good as Puzzle Master's Ajani. So if you're the type of player who just wants to spend their crystals on the best thing out there, then you can pass on the Wandering Emperor. However, if you want to play with something new and still feel pretty powerful with it, then the Wandering Emperor is definitely worth picking up. Now, the Wandering Emperor is currently in the vault. At the time of my recording this, she's in there for $25 US, and whatever that is for your currency. She's going to come with 3 of these white Kamigawa booster packs. Those are going to have just Kamigawa Neon Dynasty white cards in them, along with some other goodies. And she's in the vault for another 10 days or so. I'm hoping to get this video up tonight while there's still 10 days left in the bundle, to give you plenty of time to watch this process and determine if you want to pick up the Wandering Emperor. Now, if you choose to wait for the Wandering Emperor to come into the vault for mana crystals, she's going to cost 295 mana crystals, and I would guesstimate that she will be in the vault in the next month or so. So I would say about 3 weeks from now, you should expect to see the Wandering Emperor enter the vault right here. right, in the vault with Planeswalkers for 295 mana crystals because she is a monocolored Planeswalker. So the simple TLDR of it is, if you want something new that's very powerful, then by all means go ahead and pick up the Wandering Emperor. But if you already have Puzzle Masters Ajani, or if you don't have Puzzle Masters Ajani and you're saving up for Puzzle Masters Ajani, or you're a free-to-play player who's trying to conserve their crystals for something, this isn't a must-have Planeswalker. It's more just like a flavor of the month Planeswalker that happens to be pretty good. So thank you all so much for watching. Oh, and of course, I'm all the way at the end. I should have said this at the beginning, but I want to give an extra huge thank you to the development team for sending me this Planeswalker and sending me Kaito and sending me some other exclusives to be able to make videos. I will have a video coming up on Kaito Shizuki, the blue-black ninja Planeswalker. So keep an eye out for that one. I'm hoping to get that one out this week as well. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.